On August 11, 1999, he was sworn in as president of Guyana. At age 35, he was one of the youngest heads of state in the world. Time magazine named him one of their heroes of the environment in 2008, and he was awarded the United Nations Champion of the Earth award in 2010. He is a pioneer in the low carbon development strategy. We can continue this list for the next hour, but I believe you would prefer to hear from him directly. So please join me in welcoming the Vice President of Guyana, the Honorable Dr. Bharrat Jagdeo. Welcome to the program, Dr. Jagdeo.
Thank you very much.
And we're truly honored to have you here tonight. And Dr. Tara, welcome to the program as well. Mr. David Narayan, it's a pleasure to have you guys here. And Dr. Tara, you may continue now.
Thank you very much, Shamila. Welcome, Mr. Vice President. I echo what Shamila just said. I just want to add something very important, that because of your work in climate change, you were awarded at least 5 doctorate degrees, honorary doctorate degrees. That alone tells volume about the work you're doing in climate change and the green revolution. So I think the whole Guyanese and probably the wider Caribbean community of the world owes a debt of gratitude. Before we start on this subject, sir, I know a topical thing this week has been your interchange or exchange with the new leader of the PNC, um, Aubrey Norton. And some of the things that have been exposed in the press are really shocking. I don't know if you want to comment on that first before we start with the oil revenues and then our fund.
Yeah. Well, first of all, allow me to thank you for having me on the program. Um, it's good that members of the diaspora would want to create such an initiative so that we can. Are you hearing us?
Yes.
Are you hearing me?
Yes.
Okay, you're hearing me.
Yeah.
As I was commending the members of the diaspora, particularly Mr. Dev Narayan, for putting together this initiative, because I believe the more we engage with people and the more they're aware of the facts surrounding issues, they would be able to make informed choices and express informed opinions. And we have had a drought of informed opinions being expressed in this country. Often it's very anecdotal, rhetorical, and sometimes downright mischievous. The opinions expressed on very important topics for our country and for our people. And therefore, any attempt to bring more fact-based analyses and information to the diaspora and to Guyanese at large is a welcome initiative, and I want to thank you for this. I do not want to contaminate your program and the topic that we have on the discussion here tonight by starting off with Mr. Norton. Mr. Norton, but since you asked, he has wholly embraced the Reagan ethos and the Reagan philosophy of the PNC. And we should not find this strange because he was nurtured in the PNC. He played a role, albeit at a junior level, in the 28 years of the PNC. And it's part of his DNA, the Reagan to stay in power. And in the last 5 years of the PNC, although Granger placed him in a position of insignificance because they did not think he had a contribution to make, yet he was one of the central advocates for the rigging of the elections. And until now, he tries to defend the indefensible. So it has to be someone who is devoid of facts and delusional about the reality to make a claim that every donor report has said that APNU won the elections. And one just has to read how scathing the reports that emerge from on every international donor agency about their attempts to steal the elections and the recount. And then he owned up to something that even Granger refused to do so. Neither Granger nor Ramjatan, Nagamoto, Trotman, um, Patterson, Harmon, none of them said they had the SOPs. These that showed that the APNU won the elections. They were talking about their SOPs in a general form, but none of them said they had these SOPs in their possession, because the only SOPs that can show the PNC winning the elections have to be fraudulent ones. But Norton now has said he has those. So it is for him to have any credibility going forward. People should not listen to him on any other matter unless he produces these SOPs that show that the APNU has won the election. It goes to the question of credibility. If you can't, if he would lie about something so significant to our country and so fresh in the minds of our people and so important to the international and national communities, then how can you trust him about anything else in this country? So he will continue to operate around the fringes. In my own assessment, he has always been a junior functionary, and he says outrageous things or does outrageous things to be noticed, and therefore we'd have to deal with that when the time comes. But his threats would not intimidate the PPP. We have been hardened by battles from the beginning, from 1992 to now. We have had to deal with all sorts of attempts to displace the government outside of the ballot box, from funding criminals to trying to steal the elections to claims of discrimination, street protests, burning of buildings, and we have been resilient. And so the likes of Norton would not intimidate the People's Progressive Party. So that's all I have to say about what took place. Yeah, thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Vice President. In relation to the oil revenues, you talk about misinformation, and there's a huge, massive flow of misinformation also in the diaspora.
Now comes as no surprise to anyone. In fact, and to update the 1986 Act, the Petroleum Act. We are also strengthening the regulatory capabilities of the Ministry of Natural Resources. And ultimately, we said we will transition to an independent petroleum commission. That is in terms of the architecture for managing the sector in the future. We made it clear in opposition that we will have to repeal or reform the Sovereign Wealth Fund, the Natural Resources Fund, that was hurriedly passed by APNU in the period after the no confidence vote had succeeded. And we believe that we're critical of the legislation because we believe that the APNU Natural Resource Fund, first of all, it didn't have legitimacy because it was passed by an illegal government. But secondly, it concentrated enormous powers in the hands of the Minister of Finance alone. And that will not lend itself to transparency or to proper regulation of the sector. So we made a public commitment that we will change that. And then we outlined in our manifesto where we intended to utilize the resources, how we will, in what sectors and why, to avoid the change in relative prices and the so-called Dutch disease, which could affect all of the other sectors of the economy. So we, through our public criticisms of APNU and through the manifesto, people knew where we were headed should we win the elections. So many of the NGOs today who believe that we should get their blessing before we do anything, we sought the blessing of the electorate by telling them what we were going to do, campaigning on this, and receiving their blessings. Even the gas to energy project, we said we will build that. And this was all pre-election. So let's start now with what we did just recently. And I would choose one area to show how far we've come in terms of transparency in the use of resources and transparency surrounding oil and gas receipts. So you know that under under Jordan, when we received the signing bonus, the country was in the dark. Nobody knew about this except in the PNC. 1 year after the receipt of the signing bonus, it was discovered by this country that in fact, prior to that, maybe about a year before, after receiving the signing bonus, Mr. Jordan was asked by the Kiteshore News whether they had received the signing bonus. And he said, we didn't request, nor did we receive a signing bonus. A blatant lie. The facts emerged that they did receive the bonus and placed it into an account that is not the consolidated fund, therefore outside of the purview of the Auditor General's office, and although managed by the central bank, will not form part of the balance sheet of the central bank. So again, outside of the purview of the auditors for the central bank accounts. So we made it very clear that, and this was in breach of our financial laws. Now, the Constitution and the financial laws of our country say that any revenue receipt would have to be kept only in 3 areas, can only be kept in 3 areas. 1, the consolidated fund. 2, a deposit fund created for that special purpose, but Parliament has to be notified that the deposit fund has been created. That never happened. Or three, it has to be in a fund created by special legislation, like, say, the Lotto Fund. Now, the fund that was created for them to place this money in, the 18 million signing bonus, did not comply with any of those, the financial prescriptions, the financial laws of the country, nor the Constitution of Guyana. We had to then file a case in court to get them to transfer the money to the consolidated fund. And they only did this in 2020, in January 2020. So clearly, we had to create a situation where that will never happen again. And we promise that we're not only going to change the legislation to ensure that that doesn't happen, but we're going to criminalize non-disclosure. So the first thing we did in the Natural Resources Fund that APNU had, that passed, is we changed the provisions surrounding receipt of oil and gas money. So in the current law, the law that we passed in December last year, it now says that every cent collected from any oil and gas company, or any amount, big or small, that within 3 months of the receipt, the Minister of Finance has to publish the sum that we receive in the official gazette and notify the Parliament. If he fails to do this, he could now be charged, and there is a 10 years criminal penalty for that, jail term for that. So you can bet that no Minister of Finance in the future will ever do what Jordan did. Not that Ashni Singh would have done it, but we are building safeguards for the future. And so now every Guyanese, every single Guyanese in here, in Guyana or abroad, or any person in the world, will every year, without having to get a report from the government, can calculate how much money we've received in oil and gas revenue from royalty, from profit sharing, or from any other source. That's very important for the country, for the people, the citizens of the country. They can go to the official gazettes, which are public documents, and just simply add all the receipts, and then they will know the total sum. So that is very important. That is on the receipt side, the transparency. Secondly, on the how much money leaves the Natural Resources Fund and comes to the budget to fund budgetary expenditure. Now, under the old act, under the PNC, the Minister of Finance would set up a macroeconomic committee. And the macroeconomic committee will advise him on the economically sustainable sum that can be withdrawn from the Natural Resources Fund and deposited in the Treasury. The Minister of Finance will determine then on his own, based on a formula, what would be the fiscally sustainable amount. So the Minister of Finance on his own can determine how much money will come in from the fund to the Treasury. Now, it's all assumption based. As a former Minister of Finance, I could manipulate a formula to show any assumption, inflation rate, revenue shortfalls, projection of revenue or expenditure to show fiscal gaps. I can do any of those things because it's all assumption based. And I can take zero from the fund, or I can take all of the money in the fund, not leaving a cent in the fund. When you give one person the discretion to determine that amount. So what did we do now? In the law that we passed in December, we put a formula in place We said the first 500 million comes to the treasury, and thereafter a percentage of every increment of 500 million is saved through the natural resources fund, and the rest comes. So what this does effectively is that if you know now, and the country will know how much money we collect. So on December 31st of every year, you, any economist, any citizen of the country, anybody living abroad could say, oh, Guyana got 700 million last year in oil and gas revenue. Let us apply this formula. We'll apply the formula and we will know even before the budget comes out how much money will come from the budget, from the natural resources fund to the budget. You don't need the Minister of Finance to determine that. That's ultimate transparency. So that's transparency in terms of allocation from the NRF to the budget. The third area is how do you spend the money now? Now that you brought some of the money into the budget, how do you spend this money? And so in the old act, there were direct charges on the Natural Resources Fund, which the board could have charged. There is no direct charge on the Natural Resources Fund. So it means that every single cent spent by the government has to go for projects that are approved by the parliament. So full parliamentary debate on all the projects to be funded. So the government can't say we have a pet project here, we'll take some money and put it into that and put it into a third one. You have to go to parliament to appropriate the sums. Every cent has to be appropriated. So that's ultimate transparency. Now, what if people misuse the money appropriated? If they misuse, our financial laws have severe penalties for misusing project money, basically, criminal and other sanctions. And then the fourth area of great transparency is that prior to now, we had in the last budget and the last act that the PNC passed, the Minister of Finance controlled the fund. So we decided now to put distance between the Minister of Finance, given what we had said in opposition, and the management of the fund. So we put in place a management board of 5 members, 1 from the private sector, 1 from the parliament, and 3 from the executive. We have now just named to the board Joe Singh, who is no member of the government, Mr. Joe Singh, to chair the board, Mr. Lamy, who is the shadow minister of foreign affairs in the UK, as another member of the board, Caroline Rodriguez, woman, Amerindian, and a technical person who is now our PR in the US to the UN. And then Mr. Dunstan Barrow came from the parliament, and Ramesh Duku. Now, the same NGOs were criticizing this about the board. They were saying the president would appoint the board. They didn't have a problem when Jordan alone would have managed the fund. And if we didn't make that change, Ashni Singh alone would have managed the fund. If we had gone with the PNC Act, Ashni Singh alone. So they said, oh, the president will appoint the board. Now I've seen them gone quiet now because of the nature of the people we put on managing the remaining funds in the Natural Resources Fund. And then we have an oversight committee too that we have in place. And both will now submit reports to the parliament through the Minister of Finance, one directly the oversight body to the parliament for debate. So you'd have full debate on these issues. I don't think around the world you will find so much transparency in the surrounding accounting for the receipts transparency surrounding the transfer of funds, the use of funds, and the management of the funds in any part of the world. And I've just given you a little idea about the transparency surrounding oil and gas money and their use. That's just a tiny snippet. I can talk about the other measures in place, but I think I'm going on too long in any case.
Yeah, thank you very much, Vice President. The other thing is in the oil industry, what are your thoughts on the opportunities or lack of opportunities, training, and capacity building, especially in relation to Guyanese?
Sure. So we made it clear that on the negotiations, now there have been lots of calls for renegotiating the contract. So we claiming that the contract is lopsided. The contract is lopsided, and we acknowledge that. But we made it clear in opposition. We were not very opportunistic. We could have jumped on the bandwagon and say, yes, it's lopsided, but when we get into office, we'll renegotiate because that's a popular thing. We said no. Because at this stage, especially in the context of net zero, Guyana has to accelerate its production if it wants to get the window of opportunity for the fossil fuel sector. But we made it clear to Exxon and the others that although we will not renegotiate this contract, that any new contract outside of the Stabroek agreement, any new PSA, for example, the Kanji block or Kaichor block or any other development like you see, CGX, etc., every single one of those will now have to have come in under a new PSA that will deal with the deficiencies of the one that Trotman signed. And I was shocked to see that Ramjatan will come and say that is to their credit. I saw you writing about that's one of the greatest things they did. They didn't find the oil. In fact, when in 2015, they were saying we were lying when the oil was found because it was an election gimmick, because oil was found just before the elections. And they had nothing to do with that. They only had one issue, that is the lopsided contract. They did nothing else. So I want to make it clear on the renegotiation. We made it clear from the beginning, because I've seen some very opportunistic people, some oil and gas parties saying that, oh, we promised to renegotiate. You go to the manifesto, you go to every utterances that we made in opposition. We never did. What we said, that any new development will come in on very different terms, where we'd have to look at the royalty rates, enhanced royalty rates, greater profit sharing, maybe greater ring fencing, all of these issues that were deficiencies in the Stabroek PSA. So that was one thing we said we'll do, a new PSA. Secondly, we said we will try to get more benefits from the existing contract and bring greater benefits to Guyanese. So outside of the revenue to the government through royalty and through profit oil, how are we going to bring greater benefits to Guyana and our people? And that was through the pledge of passing local content legislation. And that brings me to the capacity building question that you asked. So we had to get a legislative framework. We passed a tough law now that created huge opportunities for Guyanese and Guyanese companies. And you should just ask the people, the Guyanese companies here now, that the foreigners are busy running them down when they were treating them with disdain, because now there's a benefit to partnering with a Guyanese company. And in fact, we have special carve-outs, for example, transportation, rentals of buildings that run into hundreds of millions of US dollars of business that can exclusively be done by Guyanese. Security services, all of those issues. And I urge your viewers to look at how powerful that legislation is and how it has changed the landscape in terms of shifting things to Guyanese now and Guyanese companies in the private sector and building capacity there and employment opportunities. That has been a major change, game changer for many of our people. And we said we'll pass that. That is part of the rebalancing to bring more benefits to our people. And then the third area we said we wanted to eke out more benefits without renegotiating the contract, but eke out more benefits is through the bringing the gas to shore, monetizing the gas, and also generating cheap power, which will have an impact to our business community and individuals, because our plan is to cut electricity prices by 2024 by 50%. And we're working aggressively towards that. And we have gone through the financial feasibility of all of those things. Don't listen to what you read every week in the Kaichur News or elsewhere. We have gone through, we are taking the highest environmental precautions on these issues. We have done our numbers on the economic feasibility of these issues. We hired the best people to look at the technical feasibility of these matters, and this is a very lucrative project for Guyana, its people, and generally for our business community. It would have a big impact. So that is where we're headed. And then on the capacity building side, we're now establishing a massive training college in Port Morant, an oil and gas training school. We're training thousands of people. We're now training individually, and we're prepared to pay to train lots of people on short-term courses that would make them immediately would create job opportunities for them immediately, like welders and fitters and all these people. They need large numbers of them. So there's a massive training program going on. On the other hand, many people in the diaspora write us and they want a job because they work in the oil and gas industry. But we don't have too many of those positions in government. Where we have a few more positions are from the regulatory perspective, not from the production perspective. So many of them may be working for oil and gas company for years, but not from a regulatory perspective. Remember, we're not they're a producing company. The oil and gas companies are actually in production. We're more functioning as a regulator at this stage.
Well said. Thank you.
Um, I just thank you very much for that explanation. I think is very good because as you read the daily papers, they always carry misinformation and distortion,
Yes.
etc.
Yes.
And part of our job here is to help clarify and bring greater understanding to these issues and to help promote the development of the country. Now, there has been a suggestion, people are not too clear. A lot of people believe. Now, I recall what the Ghanaian oil export said, that he don't believe in giving cash donation out of oil funds, that this money should be invested in infrastructural projects. I agree with him, but there are lots of Guyanese, including the PNC, who I understand submit a motion to Parliament saying that every quarter the government should give $200,000 every quarter to each adult above 18 years old. What do you think about that suggestion or proposal?
Oh.
I think it's a motion.
Yeah. The PNC has always been prone to this sort of financial irresponsibility. That is why by 1992 they bankrupted our country. And that is why it took us several decades to just crawl back to the surface from the deep hole that they dug our country. They don't when we took office, I remember Dr. Jagan, that time was in the Ministry of Finance, how hard it was to find small sums of money to do anything because the bulk of our money went to pay debts for that PNC had taken that were not put to productive use. And we saw that same consumption based philosophy return to the 5 years that they had been in office. When overall the current expenditure of the budget grew by over 70%, in fact, over 75%, but the capital budget of the country shrunk from 2014. So they spent less and than in every year they were in office than we spent on capital expenditure in 2014. And capital expenditure is investment in the future. It's the roads, the power plants, it's the schools, the hospitals, the sea defenses, the drainage and irrigation systems, the wharves that you build out to facilitate future growth. They didn't see that as important. So they increased just the recurrent expenditure where they could have, done like more food in government and all of that. So it's a consumption based philosophy. So I'm not surprised that they will come up with something like that. Now, if you do what they're saying, that works out to maybe $4,000 per person per per annum.
It's about 1
Say
yeah,
if we have
1 billion.
1 million people, that's $4 billion. $4 billion a year we'll have to give out. 4 billion US dollars if we do what you just said. 4 billion US dollars. You know what the average collection so far for the 2 years? It's been $350 million that we've been collecting per annum from the oil and gas sector. So we would distribute more than 10 times more than we're collecting now. Of course, in the outer years, we'll have more money coming in. But I'm talking about the current situation. It's stupid. It's unrealistic. It's not. It doesn't. It's not so. It doesn't even warrant responding to. But they say this because it sounds popular to people and people like free resources. So we have made it clear to avoid the Dutch disease. The body of experience is that if you spend too much on consumption, what you do basically, you just cause the exchange rate to appreciate because you have immediately an influx of US dollars into the system. And the natural tendency is for the rate to appreciate. And then once the rate appreciates, the manufacturing and agricultural sector disappear because they're globally uncompetitive. In a nutshell, that is what the Dutch disease is. So you have to spend wisely. You have to spend on infrastructure for future growth. And that is what we're doing now. So our capital budget this year over last year increased by 107%. From last year to this year, over 107%. The recurrent budget increased by less than 20%. And that's the first year of bringing in oil money into the budget. So you see immediately where the money will be going into the infrastructure of the future. That would allow us, through co-investment and other measures, to stimulate non-oil and gas growth that will generate the jobs of the future, because oil and gas is a wasting resource and may not be there forever. So that is why the big focus on agriculture, on ICT, on other services, on manufacturing, like manufacturing, on aquaculture, all of these areas where on hemp, where we're working on now to put in place the infrastructure so people can make money in and work in other sectors outside of the oil and gas industry. And in any case, the oil and gas industry is not very labor intensive, it's capital intensive. So that's one area that we intend to spend quite a bit of money. And then two other areas that build the national productive capacity would be education and health. And that's why you see massive investments in the two sectors. So investing in education, health, and infrastructure with the right policies will attract and investments in many other areas and diversify the economy. And then smaller amounts will have to be spent on people, of course. So our children, through the cash grant to children for their school and for doubling old age pension. That is where the vulnerable groups have to receive some of this money from the oil and gas sector to make sure that they have a better quality life too. But we can't splurge and give everybody. And some people like Glenn Lal says, oh, we so rich, we must stop working now. Even the United States, which has a per capita income of maybe 10 times that of ours, maybe 7, 8 times now that of ours. People are still working over there and sometimes 2, 3 jobs. He wants us to stop working and wait for a check from the government. This is the nonsense we hear every single day here. So spending the money is vital in a particular manner if we want to avoid what economists around the world have shown us it is counterproductive. And the examples of many countries, Trinidad and Tobago included, where once you have a big shock to oil revenue, if the economy is so concentrated only on oil and gas, then you have long periods of negative growth and huge turmoil in a political and economic sense.
Okay. For vulnerable groups, do you include the unemployed?
Yes. So what we're doing, we're not going to put in place an unemployment scheme like some countries have with short periods. But like you see now this year, we're moving to hire between 8 to 10,000 persons, give them part-time jobs particularly in the areas they're like 10, region 2, region 5 and 6, and the hinterland regions where you don't have so much of the oil and gas investment taking place. In 3 and 4, lots of that investment is taking place already. So that is one way of ensuring that people now could have a part-time job and then they can still go and work elsewhere. So that is part of it, ensuring people with disability, they get additional help, the elderly or children. So target groups, but not to splurge and give every able-bodied man or woman in the country money. That is not wise, and we don't have enough money to do so in any case.
Recently, I noticed in the press there was a lady by the name of Gloria Holder. I don't know if she's related to the former Minister of Agriculture, the AFC minister, but she do not generally, she shares your view, except that she says that she will have no objections if part of the oil revenue, the net profit share, can go towards
body man or woman in the country money. That is not wise, and we don't. It is not just if it takes lunch at this stage in school, fine. But we're hoping the parents' income will grow too, so they can provide more. That APNUA taking away the 10,000, we now at 25,000, and it will go to 50,000 per child. We have 170,000 children in public schools, but we add the 30,000 who are in private schools and made them eligible also because their parents can get the help too. So it's all of our children. And then the Gold Scholarship Program, we're now aiming for 20,000. But if we have 50,000 people who need a scholarship anywhere in the country, the government is prepared to pay for their scholarship through these programs.
Now, there are some Guyanese who claim that they're investing in Guyana but are not getting any incentives like the foreign or expatriate firms. You want to comment on that?
That's utter nonsense. It's complaint we get. The foreigners come, they operate in the same environment, and often they do extremely well. Our people come, they instead of wanting to go and put in their application at Go Invest at the desk that receives the application, they want to meet the head of Go Invest. You know, they will never operate that way in the United States. If you go into an agency to apply for something, you just put in your application and it gets processed. If they don't meet the head of Go Invest, they go back and they say, oh, I couldn't meet him, I can't do anything. Well, the incentive regimes are quite clear. The incentive regimes are quite clear. It's when people come and try to, oh, I want 5 vehicles and I'm putting up concessions I'm spending 50,000 US dollars, but I want concessions on 5 vehicles, and one must be an SUV, tax free and stuff like that. We have a ton of those cases. So we are creating the environment. We want our people to do well. That is why when APNU wanted to restrict their local content, they had nothing to do with it, but they put an amendment to say that only people who are born in Guyana, so if you have children, you live abroad, and your children can benefit from local content or establishing business here. We said no, all of our people, because they are Guyanese too. So we want our people to succeed. We created a framework for them to succeed. Many in the diaspora have come back and they're very happy with that framework, the local content legislation. They're doing extremely well. But sometimes a few gripers who nothing you can do to satisfy them, and they have the biggest voices. Every day they're online, And when you really probe what is going on, is either some shenanigan or something of the sort. Or they want personalized. They think you have to pull a personalized experience for them when they come to Guyana. We're busy with millions of things, We want them to come and do well. We're creating the environment for that. These are our people, wherever they live. So I've seen lots of those. And thankfully, the overwhelming number of Guyanese who are coming here are positive. They're happy with the changes. They see opportunities for business. Many of them are doing well. Many are coming back. I've seen some older people too, and young guys who've never been to Guyana before. They were born the first time they're coming home now. Their parents told them about the country. They fall in love. They see the opportunities here. So people have to come with an open mind and an entrepreneurial eye too. Not just to come to look for, to be a worker for someone else, but you have to look more towards an entrepreneurial area. Right now, we're working now to see if we can get several condos, high rises being developed, so that if Guyanese, you can only rent the oil and gas companies, and you're gonna and expats can only rent from Guyanese, and we'll need about 5,000 units, either homes or apartments to rent, as well as many Guyanese who live abroad want to own something, an apartment here, because to stay in the hotels are very expensive. The demand is huge. So we're trying to work with developers to put up some of those and then sell them to Guyanese. So, for example, a person may have 500,000 in the States and may want to invest in an apartment building here that they can then rent for 3,000-4,000 US dollars a month, or to do it on a part-time basis or so when they come down. So it creates more opportunities for our people abroad without them having to come and invest, in a new business. So they have a smaller sum of money, so it makes more people being able to invest now and to get a better return than they will get if they were to invest the same money in, say, a building in New York, an apartment in New York or Miami. And because the market is very lucrative here, particularly in some areas. So it is these things that we're working on to create more space for people abroad too. So an ordinary person in Queens or Brooklyn or the Bronx or in Toronto may not be able to put up a large sum of money. But we want to create some smaller instruments that they can too benefit from the prosperity here.
Thank you very much. I have my last question, and the gas to energy project is supposed to land at Wales. Has the Wales Development Authority been created as yet?
Yeah, the Wales Development Authority is to look at the bigger picture. That is what happens after this project is being developed. So right now, we're building a pipeline that will bring in, that has the capacity to bring in 130 million cubic feet of gas per day. We will bring in the first instance, 50 million cubic per day. The 50 million cubic will be used to generate power, and we went out for expressions of interest as to what else we'll do with the remaining gas. It will not be a lot remaining, but we most likely we're heading towards possibly a small fertilizer plant and a protein plant for livestock industry. Now we will have a significant amount of the liquids from the NGL facility, propane and cooking gas, that would supply the whole country. So when we look at the feasibility of selling the cooking gas and the propane and all of that, that by drying the gas coming in, that alone, even at a reduced price that people pay now, can practically amortize a significant part of the project. So we will look at this carefully. So right now, the project is looking at that configuration. So we are now starting to plan for what we will do for the remaining. The remaining maybe 80 cubic feet per day, right? Million cubic feet per day will come in after the 2024, 2025. That's where you'd have to find additional use for that. So we have a lot of expressions of interest, and we are laying out the Wales industrial estate. We're now recruiting a firm to say how you would lay out an industrial area. So right now, the authority, which is the managing authority, will only come in once the concept is proven. And then we have a layout, and then we have enough feedstock for the development of the whole authority and the area there and the industrial estate. So we are going in stages. Right now, the first priority is getting the pipeline built, the power plant up, the NGL facility up, and maybe one or two small business, other industries that will utilize the balance of the 50 million cubic per day. And then we are planning simultaneously for a wider industrial area, which is then will be governed by the Wales Industrial Authority.
Thank you very much, sir. Now, I know Dave is a businessman, and he will want to make a comment on the local content legislation. What do you feel about that?
Yeah.
How it helps you? What are your colleagues saying about it?
Well, the colleague was thinking it was unfair until it passed, and now they are happy about the local content. And every day I'm seeing that up to last night, as the vice president said, they're coming to Guyana and aligning with Guyanese now to have things. But Mr. Vice President, in 1 second or 2 seconds, Guyana will be having an oil boom. I saw $130 billion in 30 years. We have and the good thing with the government, they're promoting agriculture to go with the oil boom, unlike Trinidad and other countries. The hotel industry expansion, the construction of houses and buildings. Do you foresee or a labor problem,
Yeah.
and how would we able to solve this?
So this is something that people look at carefully. That economies that are developing at this pace, they have a overheating of the economy, which can be inflationary. Labor costs will skyrocket because of the scarcity of labor and the lack of capacity. So we constantly have to import capacity, contracting capacity, supplies capacity, that is more supplies here. All of this, not to displace local, but to cater for the long-term growth. And already we're seeing in some parts of the country severe labor shortages, particularly for some types of skills. So there has to be a time when, if we want to keep growing at the pace that we're growing without it becoming too inflationary and counterproductive, that we'll have to import labor. And we may have to do it in a sensible way at the beginning so that they don't compete with local, so that some of the big projects you would have to allow the projects them to bring in laborers. So, for example, if a major new hotel would demand 500-600 people, the construction, it's hard to find even for the housing sector now carpenters and construction people in many areas. You may have to allow them, and they want to bring in 500 Mexicans to work on this project, complete it, and then leave back again. Then you may have to allow it. Because if you don't, and you take labor from the existing market now, what happens is the prices go up and you have scarcity, and it would affect your capital programs. So it's a very sensitive area, Dave, that whilst, because you don't want to do it in a way where a man is still looking for a job, say a displaced sugar worker, and then he sees you bringing in somebody right away to take a job. So, or maybe some bauxite worker, somebody in Region 10, right? Seeing that. So you got to, it's a balancing act, and we're very conscious of not the need not to overheat the economy. We're very conscious about our people still some in some areas being unemployed, and we're conscious about the need to do something to ensure that we keep our capital programs going. So it's between these three variables that often you have to make the decisions. And so it's very nuanced. The decisions are very nuanced. It's not like blanket, oh, we'll allow people in one day or not. You have to do it in a sensible manner. But the point is a real point, and it's a good one. As a employer of people here in Guyana, you would know some of the difficulties we already have.
Yes, thank you, thank you.
Right.
Thank you very much. Our time is almost up. I want to thank you very much for your articulate and erudite presentation. I'm sure
Yes.
you have clarified the minds of
Yes.
many people in the diaspora as well as in
And
Guyana.
and 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 Tara, one thing I want you to say, maybe at some point in time, and you should explore it. It's the duplicity of the so-called environmentalists in Guyana.
Mhm.
They just every single day you think they're the conscience of the world. Look at the world itself that looks out for itself. The United States of America, before COP26, was saying they will veto any oil and gas exploration and development globally, new oil and gas development globally. Secondly, they were saying that you should not even develop gas as a transitional fuel for the future. After the war in Ukraine and the trouble after COP26, the United States of America is urging companies to pump more oil now.
Good.
Yes,
They're
that,
looking out for their national interests. We have a group of people. Trinidad has been producing oil and gas for 120 years. Trinidad and Tobago is close to Barbados. they never saw it fit, these environmentalists, many of them are in their 60s and 70s, to write one day to Barbados to say, you should urge Trinidad to stop producing oil because it can pollute the Caribbean Sea. Now Guyana has started producing. They wrote Barbados Prime Minister Motley, who is trying to get somebody to explore for oil and gas in her waters. They wrote her to say, stop Guyana now. You should try to stop Guyana because they can pollute the Caribbean Sea. Trinidad has been producing oil and gas for 120 years. They're making a mockery of this. Everything they just suddenly they're newly invented. And it's a duplicitous position. They don't look at what the world is doing. We have to look out for our country, but at the same time, we've made it clear our environmental credentials are strong. Our low carbon development strategy is one of the most advanced documents in the world. We're already at net zero. We intend to remain so for the long haul. I just wanted to raise that point.
Yes, that's a address we can probably write on and we can have another session. I fully agree with you because I've been keeping update what's happening in United States and Europe as well with
Yes.
oil. Now I'm going to ask Shamiza to do the closing remarks.
Okay.
Well, thank you. Thank you to Dave. And thank you, Dr. Jagdeo, for being here this evening. Tonight, we heard our current government speak of transparency. He spoke of accountability, effective management. These are all things that any company that needs to be successful needs to have. And it's so is important for countries to have the same. Tonight we saw someone who's very passionate about what he does, the things that have been put in place to make this country run effectively. And today more than ever, I am so proud to be a Guyanese. And I thank you for your leadership. We had our president last week and we heard so much passion from him.
We should get
And
the Prime Minister next week.
we will definitely, we're happy to have anyone that is willing to come here, vice president or prime minister. And we are definitely moving in the right direction. I want to hear and see more of this. So thank you
And
very much.
maybe you should get some people from the private sector who have actually benefited significantly
Yes.
because of the local content legislation.
Yes.
Let them talk about their experience. So many of our friends or brothers and sisters in the diaspora will really understand what is happening and how they have to navigate Guyana. Okay.
So with
Okay,
that said,
thank
here is
you.
an open invitation
Yeah.
to anyone who would like to come out and
Yeah.
speak of
Not,
their experience.
not anyone. We want people who can present facts and evidence-based
based on what our
information.
show is about.
We
So
don't want misinformation.
definitely not.
We got to be consistent with our policy. And we are very pleased to have, I would say, one of the greatest politicians in the Caribbean and probably Latin America with us this evening. And thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much. for
You're
being here.
welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for your
Thank
time.
you. Right.
Take care.
Mhm.
Okay.